Good morning, everybody. We have a large number of people joining us today, so I'm just going to pause for a few moments to allow them to join before we commence. Thank you. Okay, good morning. Thank you for joining us and welcome everybody to the Medilink Midlands webinar. My name is Jo Rudsky and I'm part of the events and marketing team here at Medilink Midlands. And presenting today are Professor Christopher McDermott and Philippa Headley-Tackar of NIHR Devices for Dignity. They will discuss opportunities in MedTech innovation, long-term neurological conditions. In addition, we're also joined by two people with lived experience, Pamela Goff and Philip Morris. And finally, we're also joined by Victoria Patel, one of the innovation advisors at Medilink Midlands, and she'll be briefly talking to you about Medilink and the support we're able to offer. Before I hand over to Victoria, there are a few housekeeping points I'd like to share with you. Today's webinar is recorded and we will be sharing the recording with you post-event. All of your microphones are muted. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the questions section on the right-hand side of the screen. And where possible, questions will be answered at the end of the presentations. A copy of all the presentation slides are available to download now from the handout section on this platform, and they can also be located on the right-hand toolbar. In order to reduce the strain on your local network, please close all unnecessary browsers and internet programs. If you do experience audio issues, please be aware that this may be on a local level. If you wish to consider dialing in using the number on the control panel or the free phone number in the confirmation email received. And just to let you know that this is the first time we have had so many presenters, so please bear with us when we transition from presenter to presenter. That's all the housekeeping points for now, and I'd like to hand over to my colleague Victoria Patel, Innovation Advisor at Medilink Midlands. Over to you, Victoria. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the webinar where we'll be looking at opportunities in MedTech innovation, long-term neurological conditions. This is one of a series of webinars which is delivered through Medilink Midlands, and I'd like to thank Chris, Pippa, Pamela and Philip for joining us today. A couple of things I quickly need to bring to your attention. This event is delivered through the Solstice programme, and that's part funded by the European Regional Development Fund and the East Midlands Academic Health Science Network. Through this programme, we offer support to SMEs to help you innovate your products and services. In addition to the events, we also administer a grant scheme for all life sciences businesses or SMEs throughout the East Midlands and parts of Semlet. And if you'd like to find out any more, please just do let us know in the feedback form and one of our advisors will be in touch with you as soon as we can. Before I hand over to Chris, I just want to give you a bit of background of where we Medilink Midlands are in relation to the COVID crisis. Our members and our clients are really important to us, and despite the current situation, Medilink Midlands are still here for you, supporting you as best we can. Business advisors, we're all working from home, but we're just a phone call and email away, and we're keen to assist you through this time and beyond. So please do get in touch if there's anything that we can help you with. We've also created a resource page on the Medilink Midlands website for anything COVID-19 related. It's really comprehensive, it gets updated daily with the latest information, and we've tried to collate as much information from various sources in one page, so it's really easy to have a look at. So if you've not checked that out, please do have a look. For our members, we're also holding frequent virtual coffee breaks where you can catch up and share with peers. The 9th one took place on Tuesday and around a dozen members joined, and it's a really good opportunity to catch up with peers, finding out how your colleagues are dealing with the crisis and so on. So once again, thank you for joining us today, and thank you Chris, Pippa, Pamela and Philip for presenting. And with that, I'll hand over to you, Chris.
Okay, I'm hoping that is now working. So just it doesn't seem to be. Okay, I need some indication that the slides are working.
That's moving, Chris. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about the delay, everybody. So I'm Chris McDermott. I'm a neurologist at Sheffield Teaching Hospitals, and I'm also a professor of neurology at the University of Sheffield. And I am the theme lead for long-term neurological conditions in the Devices for Dignity MedTech Co-operative, which is based in Sheffield, but is a national organisation. What we wanted to do today was to talk about really the burden of neurological disease, some of the challenges faced by people living with neurological disease, and think about where technology and innovation might be able to support individuals who are living with neurological conditions. So my job really is to sort of set the scene, give some fast facts about how much neurological disease is out there, some of those challenges, and then we'll be hearing from people with real lived experience of some of these conditions, and then Pippa will go into much more detail about the role of Devices for Dignity and how we might be able to partner and support each other in partnership with people living with neurological conditions and yourselves to improve things. So it's some fast facts, numbers first of all. So this just gives you know, a snapshot of how much neurological disease is out there. So 16.5 million. So that's a huge burden, and this is a survey undertaken by the Neurological Alliance. We'll just look at other data. There's a lot out there, but people living with neurological conditions have the lowest health-related quality of life of any of the long-term conditions. So that's a real concern. Oops. I see what's going on. I just need to move the webinar control panel, which is stopping me seeing what I'm talking about. So 750 million spent on urgent and emergency care, including admission to hospital. So the NHS is spending a lot for emergency care of people with neurological conditions. And then the budget that's being spent on non-urgent care is estimated to be over 4.4 billion, and 14% of the social care budget is being spent on people living with neurological conditions. So it's common. People facing these conditions have low quality of life, and that's despite large amounts of money being spent in both the urgent care setting and in the social care and unplanned NHS sector. The impact of neurological conditions on the quality of life is significant. So 46% of individuals describe it having a great extent on their life. 45% it affects their life to a moderate extent. And the impact on day-to-day living, and we'll come on to this in a bit more detail, is also large. 42% say that their day-to-day activities are greatly affected by their neurological illness. So what are neurological conditions? So it's useful to group them into three types. So there are those types of neurological conditions that come on suddenly and strike people out of the blue. So the most obvious example of this would be a stroke. So someone's just going about their normal life and they have a brain attack or stroke, and that immediately gives them focal neurological deficits which impact on their life. Other sudden onset things, traumatic brain injury, spinal injury from trauma, meningitis, Guillain-Barré syndrome. These are all sort of examples of sudden onset neurological conditions. Then there are things which are intermittent, and so epilepsy is a good example of this. So an individual going about their life but can be struck at any moment with an incapacitating seizure, which is unpredictable and hangs over their life. That unpredictability and intermittent nature of the impact of the condition. And then you have things which are progressive, and these would be exemplified by the neurodegenerative disorders such as Parkinson's disease, Huntington's disease, which progress relentlessly over years. Then you have conditions like motor neuron disease, and particularly aggressive forms of multiple sclerosis, where the progression can be breathtakingly rapid. And in motor neuron disease, people can die within 2 to 3 years with rapidly progressing disability on a week-by-week basis. So that's just the flavour if we try and group the conditions, the neurological conditions that make up that large burden. This is some data taken from the Neurological Alliance's Neuro Numbers 2019 document, which I would recommend to people. So it's just giving more detail on the numbers of some of the more common neurological conditions. The document itself breaks these down across the range of all the neurological conditions. And there's a thing just to take away from this. I think sometimes people think neurological disease is a disease of the elderly, and there's no doubt that it does affect the aging population. But neurological diseases affect people in the prime of their life, when they're being highly productive, and that's indicated there, highlighted. So this is a real problem for all sectors of society, all ages. So some of the things that I think is just worth emphasising, people often think about neurological disease and the physical disabilities and impacts that it has, but I think it's also worth bearing in mind the other impacts that it has. So there's just a few quotes here taken from some of the charities, motor neuron disease, stroke, MS. Over 80% of people with MND will have communication difficulties. For some, that's a complete loss of voice. Just imagining the impact of that inability to take part in day-to-day conversation, communicating what you need, what you want. A third of stroke survivors suffer depression after suffering a stroke. 3 out of 5 people living with multiple sclerosis experiencing loneliness. So it's not just a physical burden, there's a large mental health burden of living with chronic neurological disease. And there is limited support out there, and that's become worse, and we'll touch on this following COVID, or during this current pandemic that we're in. So there's a huge need, and services are really struggling to meet those needs. So there's sort of philosophy that we take within Devices for Dignity, and we've done this in many of our projects, is to listen to the people living with these conditions and identify what the unmet needs are, and be responsive to the unmet needs, be led by the people living with the conditions to come up with the solutions to those problems in partnership. What we're trying to get away from is the more old-fashioned approach of health professionals or designers coming up with things in isolation and then them being pushed onto the people living with these conditions. I think the history is littered with examples where this sort of approach, where things are pushed onto individuals, there just is no uptake, and the technologies are not used because they were not really designed appropriately with users in mind. So this is an example of one of our workshops with people affected by these conditions, sitting around a table with designers, engineers, just thinking about what the unmet needs are, and sketching out ideas about how we might begin to develop solutions for those needs. So I think it's useful then to break down, as we have done, to the sudden onset the gradual progression and the rapid progression conditions, and just think about where technology may be able to help, where innovation in technology might be able to help. And we've broken it down here into how individuals with these disorders will interact with healthcare and social care and self-management. And there are some similarities across the different groups, but there will be important differences, and we will come on to that. Then the other area where we think technology has a role to play and certainly can be improved is how we support people living with these different conditions in completing their activities of daily living. So this is simple things such as going to the toilet, having a meal, having a conversation, cleaning themselves, doing day-to-day business in their house. And then the final thing, and one which is, I think, often overlooked, and was one of the reasons why I highlighted the sort of mental health issues earlier on, is well-being, thriving, living life. So these things are really important, and time again, people affected by these conditions, talk about it shouldn't all be on the focus about the disease and managing the disease and doing the activities of daily living, but it should be about living life, doing things that that they enjoy, participating in society. So these are equally important things and prioritized by patients along with those other aspects. The industrial strategy from 2017, innovation in products and services can make a significant difference to UK productivity and individuals' well-being. And that's true in this space as well. I think it really applies. And industry are part of the solution to supporting people achieve those three goals with regards to interacting with healthcare better, living life well, and supporting them to do the activities of daily living. I really think that the industry and technology innovation is how we support people. So a way of thinking about this, and to start the conversation that we'll have later on in this webinar, is we thought we would phrase what if to get people thinking. So in terms of the interaction with health and social care, how could technology be part of the solution? So what if information regarding diagnosis could be better recorded and shared to support commissioning? What if care coordination can be improved for individuals across organisational boundaries? What if self-management and self-care could be optimised for individuals' specific needs? More information about recognising why is it certain days good and why is certain days bad, looking at trends in what's been happening. What if immediate feedback and support could be provided from specialists to support individuals and their paid and unpaid carers? And what if access to specialists and community rehabilitation could be improved regardless of the geography? So that's thinking about telehealth, telemonitoring. Then in terms of supporting activities of daily living, what if technology could reduce the frustration of being unable to do those everyday little things? What if dignity and independence could be maintained for eating, drinking, dressing? What if people were supported to stay in work longer whilst living with neurological conditions? What if users' pride or confidence were not impacted by the use of balance or mobility aids and devices? What if assistive technologies did not adversely affect what people could wear or where they could go? This control panel is causing me problems. What if technologies could be adapted, personalized to meet needs across a range of user aspirations, lifestyle, age groups and contexts? And then lastly, looking at the well-being travel and hobbies? What if there were better ways of facilitating physical activity and exercise, working with the fitness industry or the voluntary sector? What if individuals could better monitor the impact and benefits of their exercise activity to support their own self-knowledge and to share with care teams how they were doing? What if community and social spaces were designed to facilitate participation in hobbies and social activities? What if communication aids were smarter, quicker, context-specific? What if it was easier for someone with impaired mobility to travel for holidays or visit friends? So I hope that's given some idea of what are priorities that people living with these conditions are coming to us and asking how technology might help them. And I think what will hopefully come across is that much of it is not related to specific medical issues. It's about how people live their lives, and that's what patients living with the conditions want sort of industry technology designers to help them with. Obviously, we're all on this webinar and not meeting face-to-face because of the current pandemic, and it has had an impact. And I think anything that we do and collaborations going forward, they need to acknowledge the new reality of a pandemic world and future-proof for the next pandemic. And what's been happening, what we've been seeing, there is a definite reduction in routine care, rehabilitation, outpatients, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, that people with long-term neurological conditions need. That's all been reduced, and it's having a huge knock-on effect in terms of physical and mental health, increasing stress and burden on carers. So a huge psychological impact. And then there's also, we're beginning to realise, and there were some papers on this in the last week or so, that do seem to be neurological sequelae of COVID that hadn't really been recognised to begin with. So stroke is more common, and other residual neurological problems after the immediate COVID dangerous past for an individual. So these are things that we need to be mindful of. And then one of the things that I've noticed that there has been a huge explosion in the use of digital technologies as a response to COVID, and this is an example of it, this meeting with clinics done remotely, etc., other digital solutions. But there's a sense that they're all of a sudden being thrown out there and being used. And so do we need to pause and think about who we are designing these new services for, and are we designing them with accessibility in mind? So I think that's my last slide. I think I would just emphasize that the ethos here is that what we want to do is to develop exciting, innovative approaches in partnership with industry, with innovators, and most importantly, with people living with these conditions, so we get to pull on the technology from those individuals rather than pushing it on them. And so with that, I think that's my last slide. So I now, it's a great pleasure to be able to hand over to Pamela Goff, who is going to talk about her experience and about Parkinson's disease and talk to us about that. So I just need to turn off my camera. So over to you, Pamela.
Thank you, and hello, good morning. I'm here to talk about a neurological condition that you probably think you know something about. I hope that by sharing my personal experience of living with Parkinson's, you may discover links and answers to where could technology make a difference. So from my personal point of view, you're talking to somebody that's worked in the NHS for virtually 40 years. I initially was a radiographer, and I became the departmental manager, and then I moved into management and became the trust risk manager. I took early retirement, and I don't think it's cause and effect, but 11 years ago I was diagnosed with Parkinson's. But since then I've been actively involved using my knowledge, experience and education by volunteering for various things, including this morning. For example, I was one of the members of the patient advisory group for the NHS England testbed in Sheffield. I'm also the chair of the Sheffield branch of Parkinson's UK, and we support people in Sheffield who have got Parkinson's and their family and friends. For instance, we organise exercise classes and social events. So what have I learned over the years? When discussing the use of technology, I find that end users should engage in the art of stating the obvious. I've left an expletive out there. It's well worth listening to, believe me. And it never ceases to surprise me how little some technology companies have previously engaged not engaged with end users before investing loads of money in developing products and services. If you wanted to get some information about Parkinson's other than listening to me, you'd probably go onto the search engine and end up looking at Wikipedia. As well as the written explanation of Parkinson's, you will also see this line drawing. Next slide, please. And this is a gentleman, is a line drawing of a gentleman who obviously is bent over, and as you could see, he has a tremor, shuffling about in slippers. And I always think that that cardigan is probably dark green for some reason or another. And this is the image that springs to mind if you don't know anybody that has Parkinson's. So this line drawing was drawn in 1817. Think about it. The three notable dates for Parkinson's is that James Parkinson wrote the paper on the shaking palsy at that time. We roll forward to 1967. The use of levodopa revolutionized treatment when it was discovered that the lack of dopamine caused most of the problems. And since then, in the 1980s, it was discovered that deep brain stimulation could reduce the tremor for some people. That's like a heart pacemaker, but in the brain. So despite all the research that's going on, and I know that there is a lot at the moment around the world, from a patient's point of view, I am taking the levodopa tablets that were discovered in 1967. Next slide, please. So most of you probably know about the motor symptoms to do with Parkinson, the rigidity and stiffness that the muscles take on, especially when you haven't taken your tablets. Next. The slowness, and it's one thing that my sons noticed when they came home from university and things, how slow I became, although I didn't notice. The next one is the resting tremor. Not everybody has a tremor, and I emphasize that it's a resting tremor. If I pick something up, then my tremor disappears. And the postural instability, and that's really good for going for a fall. People with Parkinson's, unless they take steps to combat it, can't balance and fall quite frequently. So they're the motor symptoms. And what I want to introduce to you is this list of the next slide of the non-motor symptoms. I'm not going to read out all this list, but there are 34 of them there. And what I want to emphasize is that we don't have all of these symptoms all of the time. Not everybody has these symptoms. Some are more common than others. And in this day and age, the change in taste and smell is quite amusing to me. I haven't been able to taste and smell very well for 11 years, and yet it's suddenly part of COVID-19. I shouldn't have written all this down. So next slide, please. Not all people with Parkinson's are the same. We don't look all like the little man in the green cardigan shuffling around. There is no known cure. It's just something that carries on in our lives and we deteriorate, and that's it. Most Parkinson's is idiopathic, and that's a posh word that the doctors use to say they've no idea why we've got it, although there are a very small number of people who carry a faulty gene. There's no test, there's no blood test, no imaging that defines a diagnosis, and it's diagnosed by taking a thorough clinical history, observing signs and interpreting symptoms by a specialist. And this means that a patient at diagnosis will be questioned by a specialist, and smoke and mirrors, hey presto, you've got Parkinson's. There's no x-ray to show you, there's no blood test that says what the numbers are that could possibly indicate it. And many patients get upset by the diagnosis and are bewildered by the process of how a doctor has reached this stage. And the way in which someone receives this first diagnosis will have an effect on their attitude and self-management for the rest of their life. And I've come across a lot of people who were just told, you've got Parkinson's, come back in a month's time, and that was it. Not all people with Parkinson's have all the symptoms all of the time, although the general pathway into the future will show deterioration. There are many ups and downs from hour to hour and from person to person. And the medication that we take merely eases the motor symptoms. But as time goes on and the dopamine in our brains becomes less, we have to take more and more tablets and they become less effective. Plus, the effects of the daily medication is transient. So we have to be careful to take our medication on time at a time that is suitable for the person with Parkinson's, wherever we are, especially in hospital. Next slide, please. There is a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Research shows that there is one way to slow down this deterioration, and that is exercise. And I don't mean just a gentle stroll in the park. 2.5 hours a week with exercise that raises the heart rate. And for younger people in early diagnosis, this could mean rowing or boxing. I do boxing. Or for elderly patients, when the symptoms are more complex, to do seated exercise. But exercise you must do. And this enhances balance, posture, speed and strength. If you do it in a class, which we can't do at the moment, it also increases the social side of life. So I hope giving you a whistle-stop tour of Parkinson's has given you some ideas of where you can match your technology and your knowledge and influence with the parts of Parkinson's. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope your ideas can be discussed later on. Thank you.
Hello, I hope everybody can hear me and see my screen. So the next speaker today is Philip Morris, who will be talking about design from the user perspective, the good, the bad, and how could it be better. So Philip, are you there?
Hi.
Hello, Philip. So thank you for joining us. So before we start, would it be okay to if you tell us a bit about yourself?
Good morning, everybody. Basically, I'm a C6, C7 tetraplegic. I had a spinal cord injury around 13 years ago, which has left me paralysed from the chest down and with really limited dexterity and wheelchair bound, basically. Yeah.
Thanks, Philip.
You're welcome.
So we've had a few conversations about your thoughts from a user perspective of technology. And so the first question I'd like to ask you today is, so what are your experiences of using technology in everyday life? And when we've spoken, the first thing we sort of explored was starting with communication.
Yeah, I mainly use my iPad and iPhone because they both have a speech to text function, which saves me a massive amount of time because of my lack of dexterity. I don't have to fumble about trying to write a text message or answer an email or so forth. Just makes life a lot easier. Yeah. Okay,
thanks. And you've also mentioned to me something about devices in terms of control in the home.
Yeah, a number of years ago, my occupational therapist arranged for me to have a possum, which is a device that can be controlled by using a button and counting the clicks. You have to listen to the noises and then accept the clicks, and it all becomes a little bit confusing and frustrating. And to do a simple task like turning the volume up on your TV takes about 3 or 4 minutes, and it was, yeah, it just became far too annoying. So I gave it back to the OT in the hope that somebody else could make better use of it, basically.
Yeah. And we've also spoken a bit about bed control. This is something you're particularly interested in.
Yeah, I have a profiling hospital type bed, which has a hand control unit, and it is in a fixed position on an arm, which is connected to the backrest of my bed. This works really well for myself because of my lack of dexterity. Most profiling beds come with a handset, which is attached to a coiled wire, I suppose a bit like an old telephone wire, and it can be very easily knocked off the bed. And once it's on the floor, I've lost my independence, and yeah, I'm unable to move the bed into a position if I wanted to just sit up and cough. So yeah, I've had this. Sorry.
No, sorry.
Sorry. No, after you.
So I think that's interesting. So that you've talked about sort of a good technology and two not so good examples. I think finally we talked a bit about you've been involved in a project design project looking at managing your own health. I wondered if you could tell us about that as well.
Yeah, a number of years ago, I became a type 2 diabetic, and after having discussions with a specialist here in Nottingham, again, because of my lack of dexterity, I'm unable to administer the insulin myself. So I have to rely on my carers. I have 24-hour care, you see. And we just thought there's got to be a way for me to do it, even with my dexterity problems. And we looked at a number of things. Increasing the thickness of the grip to make it easier for me to hold, and for putting on the needles and taking off the needles. But unfortunately, it didn't really come to anything. So yeah, I just have to rely on my carers to do it twice a day for me now, which is unfortunate, but hey ho.
Okay, so the second question we asked you to kind of help us with today was, what are the key things you think technology designers and developers should think about? What would be your top advice?
I think technology developers should involve the end users more to help design and inspire them better products. I believe we all have a wealth of experience and a voice of common sense, really. Should be listened to.
And do you think it's always about inventing something new or thinking about using technology in a different way?
No, not at all. There's lots of technology out there, and I'm sure a hell of a lot of it could be repurposed and made to be used in a better way, or well, a different way for a range of different people that find themselves with different predicaments. For example, it would be good to be able to use voice recognition technology like Alexa to enable me to control my profiling bed. Yeah, that would be fantastic. Yeah.
And what would you like technology to do for you?
I think about certain devices and technologies that could look a lot less like medical equipment and possibly more like, I don't know, a fashion or a household item. For example, like the device that's being used to monitor blood sugars for type 1 diabetics, like a wristband or some kind of wearable for exercise, or that's
And I think when we've spoken, we've talked a lot, as Chris was saying earlier, haven't we, about the interest in having technology for everyday daily living activities. And I think you made some interesting comments as well about thinking about personalisation too.
Yeah, a lot of technologies, I suppose, are made for a large number of people, but they could really do with the option of being, I can't think of the right word, so excuse me, everybody, to be able to be personalised a bit more. I'm sorry, I can't remember my.
No, that's brilliant. I think that's helped a lot in terms of the audience today, hopefully really listening to what your experience has meant in terms of where you see the opportunities would be. So thank you very much, Philip, for sharing all that, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for everybody listening to me stumble on.
No, that's brilliant, Philip. Thank you. I'm just going to quickly whiz through a couple of slides now about devices for dignity that you've heard about so far today, because I'm aware we're coming to the end and there may be some questions. So I was going to quickly talk about how devices for dignity support product innovation. So we've spoken today a lot about market pull rather than technology push, and understanding that need for technology opportunities. So we are an NHS-hosted, NIHR-funded organisation that looks to catalyse technology development based on unmet need for people with long-term conditions to help them live with dignity, hence our name, and independence. And those technologies could be devices, it could be digital solutions, very much within our core clinical themes of neurological conditions, diabetes, renal tech, and thinking about assistive and rehabilitation technologies as well. And to do that, we work in partnership. So we bring together the great minds and expertise from people living with the conditions themselves and their carers, care homes, the NHS, industry, academia, and look at how you combine that expertise to be able to sort of evolve and move products forward. So one example of that is the head up collar, a neck collar, which was designed to ease pain and help with those daily activities like eating, drinking, swallowing, caused by neck muscle weakness for people that had got motor neuron disease or other conditions. And it's important to understand this was very much driven and led by people with the condition, sort of saying, you know, this is an issue, the product's already out there, or look very medical, or don't do the job like we want them to do, affects what I wear. And that dialogue started with those groups of people, with clinical teams. Chris was the lead for this particular project, And therefore that was the catalyst for starting that innovation. It was very much a partnership project with the University of Sheffield and Sheffield Hallam, and the MND Association, and funded by NIHR I funding. And if we look at that development journey, D4D were very much a part of that journey from concept to commercialisation. So we think about all those different stages, and it's very hard to put that on a slide because we know it's not particularly linear, but very much starting with the user groups to really understand and make sure we validated that need. So it might be a need for a few individuals. Can we be sure that that's something which has got that wider impact and reach? And looking about the stages on that journey in terms of bid writing, pulling in funding to move projects forward where we have a lot of expertise, thinking about regulatory, and thinking about then how we take it to market. And you can see there the commercial partner Talamade that are now selling this product nationally, and this product's available in a number of trusts. So that's a good example of showing that whole end-to-end journey of product innovation based on need. So this is a quick summary of some of our core services. Clearly that will be bespoke to what the project needs and pulling that team together. But as I've mentioned, we're very involved with the patient and public involvement and supporting funding bids. This is our collaborator portal on our website. So if you're thinking of sort of expressing an interest in working with us, you might have an unmet need or you might want to collaborate. This is the way through. I mean, we'll ask you how you started to think about how you validated that unmet need. What have you done to understand that that is something where a solution is required and something doesn't exist elsewhere? Thinking about funding, there will be a number of calls open now in terms of very specific to COVID-19, which is very relevant to this particular thing we're talking about today. And there will be coming up, particularly for the industry market, Innovate and NIHR funding that's nationally available. So organisations like Medilink and ourselves can sort of advise on how you identify funding opportunities in good notice in order to be able to pull together quality applications. There's also MedTech Navigator, so this is another way of smaller pots of funding to start that kind of dialogue and interaction and proof of concept with the knowledge base. Or you might want to look from the creative and digital side, looking at Creative England, so different forms of finance to stimulate innovation activity and think about collaboration in the healthcare space. And the last thing I wanted to mention was that we are national. So Chris mentioned this earlier on, that we're one of 11 MedTech cooperatives nationally. And we're not about location, we're about theme. So we focus on long-term conditions. But clearly it'll be possible to work with us, with our colleagues down in Cambridge that focus on brain injury, or it might be good to work with us in Nottingham in their mental health activities. So it means we're not confined to a specific geography. And I think that makes it quite exciting in terms of bringing us into collaborative bids, where you've got the opportunity then to look at technology and innovation in very different geographies with different populations and different infrastructure to see how that would work. So that's a very quick journey through who we are, but you can of course have a look at our website and follow our Twitter to find out a bit more about that. But I wanted to leave enough time if there are any questions out there.
Thanks very much, Pippa. We do have a number of questions in, and I can see they are rapidly coming in and out. We do have 12 minutes left, so if anybody else wants to send any questions through to Pippa and Chris, please feel free. Okay, so to start with the questions then, the first one to you: why does exercise slow the deterioration in Parkinson's sufferers?
Okay, so I'll take that. So I don't think I know the answer to that. If I'm honest, we do. People do decondition. So I think when people experience whatever neurological condition is, physical activity becomes more challenging, either because balance is poor or they have muscle weakness. And so by not, just that would happen to anybody, if you do less of something, things become harder and harder, and so their muscles decondition. And so I think, and this is speculative now, that you get an added effect on top of whatever the initial problems were, the disease, where you just begin to decondition. I suppose the extreme example of deconditioning is astronauts when they're in zero gravity environments. So if people stop doing things, it becomes difficult. The balance goes off because you're just not using it. So we see that exercise has benefits in terms of improving balance, maintaining muscle condition, but also it keeps weight off. So if the nervous system is impaired, if you increase weight by not sort of moving about and doing things, then you put even more burden and stress on the nervous system, on the muscles. And then biologically, there is increasing evidence that the sort of trophic factors that are released through exercise can have beneficial effects on some of these disease processes. And then also there's the well-being aspect of things. So we do know that exercise releases natural endorphins, and so what are the benefits of that in terms of well-being. So I think exercise is generally a good thing, and I'm often asked about exercise in clinic, and what I say is that safe exercise is good. Don't try and do crazy things, because if you fall and fracture your hip, then that's going to set you back, and that's really bad. So it's about being safe, but we do encourage exercise. So that was a long-winded answer when I originally said I have nothing to say on it.
Thank you, Chris.
Can I add something there? I also, a bit of a mention for one of our partners in Sheffield, the Advanced Wellbeing Research Centre with Sheffield Hallam University, and a lot of interest there in terms of looking at physical activity across a range of conditions. So we at Devices for Dignity and our counterpart MedTech Co-operative, the Child Health group, are looking to work very closely and look at physical activity and kind of how that lends itself to supporting people with long-term conditions.
Thank you, Pippa. Okay, so the next question we have is, what is the best way to engage with or contact PWP in research and innovation? Is there a group to contact in the first instance?
So it's about reaching out to public and patient groups. Is that sorry, it broke up a little bit.
Sorry, can you hear me? Okay, sorry, I'll read it out again. What is the best way to engage with or contact PWP in research and innovation? Is there a group to contact in the first instance?
I don't know what PWP.
Parkinson. I was so I think people Parkinson's. I think Parkinson's UK obviously is a very good initial point of contact to understand what kind of groups already exist and what kind of networks are there. I think that people can look at where there are routes through to engaging with people living with certain conditions and where those networks exist. We at D4D, if particular inquiries coming through where it's about a technology in that space, we'd be interested in knowing a bit about that. And if there's a way of us, sometimes it will be projects that we can support. We have a portfolio where we're looking at quality. It's not about the volume of stuff we do, it's about that quality response. But if it isn't something we can help with, we will find a way to kind of move that on to the relevant networks to sort of help support that.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next question. Do Devices for Dignity get involved in the prototype and product development work for innovations? If so, how would this be funded and who would own any IP related to a project?
Yes, we do. We get involved in every stage of that development journey. So in terms of funding, we look to work together on applying for grant funding to fund our respective roles within that product development. And I think when it comes to IP, I think that would be dependent on where you've got background and foreground IP developed within the project. But of course, all the way along, when we're developing that relationship in terms of product development, when you have partners, we all explore that relationship. We make sure that people are comfortable with the values, the expectations of where things will progress in terms of moving to market. We would have collaboration agreements. We would discuss that along that particular journey. So it will be bespoke to the project. We'll be very much getting involved in that prototyping and product development piece.
Okay, thank you. So a few more questions for you. How are collaborations with Devices for Dignity funded?
I think that, yeah, I kind of mentioned a bit of that just then. So it will be looking at the right the right grant opportunity and going in under a collaborative basis within grants. Also looking at private finance, and also we have obviously commercial arrangements with companies that seek to bring us in because they see the value and expertise of us being from that NHS hosted position, and how we can then work with them to bring our expertise into projects.
Okay, so we've got a follow-on from the exercise question, which is instinct says that exercise increases the blood flow around the body. I have been reading on dopamine, and one of its roles in the body is as a, vasodilator, i.e. helping the body's blood flow. So if a lack of dopamine infers a slowdown in blood flow and oxygen delivery to the brain, might this all be connected?
Yes, it might be, but I think these are hypotheses, and that, as Pippa's touched on, it's an area of active research to understand why. So we all feel exercise is good. There's some evidence that it does benefit people with long-term conditions if done safely, but I think it is fair to say that we don't fully understand the mechanisms and what's going on in the body biologically. So what you've just proposed there is a sound hypothesis, and it's the type of thing that is being looked at in the Advanced Wellbeing Centre that Pippa mentioned.
Okay, and I've also had a note from somebody that says, just a quick note to say that in our latest report on the restart of neurology services post-COVID, we do point out the circumstances where digital technology will pose challenges for people with neurological conditions, and that some treatments are best done face-to-face to avoid digital exclusion.
Yes, so that was so that's I sort of touched on that a little bit. I've been somewhat taken aback by the sudden explosion in various digital technologies that has sort of being forced not just on people living with these conditions, but also us as healthcare providers, and they're not all fit for purpose. And you know, my own experience in trying to deliver healthcare to people, it is very challenging. And I was only yesterday in a telephone consultation with someone who really had very pronounced communication difficulties, that, you know, that I must see face to face, and I have to make that case within the trust, because the face-to-face visits are default not allowed at the moment. But you're quite right, there is a real risk of excluding people, particularly if technology isn't thought about. Whether technology is a solution to everything, you know, I'm uncertain, but certainly some of the things we're being forced to use, I don't think are fit for purpose and are excluding people. So it is a worry, and something that's important to keep a focus on.
Yeah,
Okay.
just to add to Chris there, yes, I mean, it maybe didn't come across quite strongly enough in my presentation there, but I think when we talk about using technology, it's not about replacing. We are looking at how it adds value and it supports that very human interactions, rather than trying to sort of become digital first on everything. It's about supporting that human interface.
Fantastic. Thank you, both of you. Unfortunately, that's all the time we've got for questions today. We really do appreciate your presentations, Chris and Pippa, and also thank you to Pamela and Phil for joining us today and sharing their experiences. We hope that all of our delegates have found the webinar useful. Once the webinar has closed, you will receive a survey from us. If you could please take the time to complete this, as feedback is vital to assist us with future webinars. There is a question on there if you wish to be introduced directly to our presenters at NIHR Devices for Dignity. Our next webinar is on Tuesday the 14th at 2 p.m. and this is the Food Supplement Special Interest Group, and this will focus on vitamin D. On Wednesday the 15th at 11 a.m. we have a webinar focusing on how to pitch to investors as a life science company. And then finally at 10 o'clock on Thursday the 16th, we have our second special interest group for the week, and this is Medical Technologies and Systems Special Interest Group, where we will be discussing digital health, current applications and future trends for mental health care. For details of these and all other virtual events in our programme, please visit medilinkm.com/events. Once again, thank you to Chris, Philippa, Pamela and Philip for all your time, and for the delegates for joining us today. We hope you can join us together at another virtual event soon. Until then, please stay safe and goodbye for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.